I thought some of your methods were just flat out wrong.
I knew you were kind of iffy at first, as is everyone when they first see my stuff, but I didn't know you were actually kind of like almost opposed to it.
Totally
at first.
opposed. This is not right. This is not what the powerlifting standards are. Basically, I had to teach every single one of my clients how to run. I was like, oh, running's bad for my knees. Like, no, bad techniques is bad for your knees.
Yes, exactly. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Joel Seedman, my co-host Jonathan Moore, and the special guest of the hour, Ben Lai, Benjamin Lai. I know you like to be called Ben, or Ben Lai, the Asian guy, as people can see you on Instagram.
Benny Boo Boo Bear.
Ah, yes, Benny Boo Boo
Hipstone
Bear.
Lai. Yep, that's right.
Exactly. We got all kinds of nicknames for you depending on who's calling it to you. So it's we've known each other for what, 13, 14 years now. We've been talking about doing some type of collaboration for years now. It's kind of funny that it's starting off with a podcast like this and us having a discussion, because we have so many discussions even when we're training.
Yeah, that's what, like, our sessions now have become more like you kind of talk about. Some people like shadow with you, and it's more just like associated colleagues.
Exactly.
That now we're bouncing ideas off each other and talk about the latest trend in health and fitness and stuff. So
well, I think at this stage, I'm learning as much from you as you're learning from me. And obviously when we first started, it was mainly you learning from me, just because you were still working on your master. You hadn't even started your master's at that point. I'm going to let you jump in and kind of give the audience a bit more about your background. You thought we've known each other for a long time, man. That's been like 8 or 9 years.
It's felt like
almost
20.
Yeah.
So for him, it's probably like 30, 40.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Hey, that's what happens. Anyone who knows me, it feels like double the length, because
he's a stubborn guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the one who got him on Instagram.
That's right.
Yeah, because
you were the one that got me on Instagram.
He would not get on social media. He's like, I don't like social media.
Really?
That's not me. That's not me. I was like, dude,
I didn't know that.
Do that. You have to do it. Just post one video. And that's when he came up with like muscle morsels.
Yeah, muscle morsels. Right? That's right. That's right.
Now I can't stop. I can't stop.
And then now you got like a bunch of these likes, the followers, and then people started getting haters, and he got all this traction and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I forgot you were the one who was really. That's right. You were really pushing for me to get on social media, and I was kind of adamant that I didn't need to, because at the time I was writing a lot of articles for
T-Nation, right?
T-Nation, Muscle and Fitness,
Yahoo.
Men's Health, Yahoo, Stack. I mean, all the different magazines. And in my mind, like, okay, that was enough. But you kept saying, you've got to do this. This is what's going to really kind of kick charge your career, so to speak.
Yeah.
That was a good advice. Another reason
now you get
why
all the free equipment.
I know, right? All this free equipment. I should be paying you like a finder's fee or something.
Yeah, royalty.
You need a Ben tax. You need a Ben tax on it.
Tax. I love it. Let's kind of start off here telling the audience a little bit about your background. I feel like there's so much that you have in terms of kind of how you got into kinesiology,
right,
and also how we started. But just, I'm going to let you kind of take it for a minute or two here. Just you start where you want to start, whether it's high school, college, whatever.
I mean, like, we said we met in 2014, but there's a lot of stuff that built up to that point for me. Starting training with you, like even in middle school, right? I was already playing a bunch of sports, like 4 sports. I was soccer, track and field, golf. I didn't, in high school I went to, wrestling, football, basketball, until I realized how short I was. Because in middle school, I was the tallest kid at 5'8". And then when I went to basketball practice, so tryouts in ninth grade, I walked up, and the coach was like, hey, point guard's over here, big man over there. I was like, Coach, I played center last year. He goes, no, point guard. I was like,
that's hilarious.
I don't know how to dribble the ball. So, so basketball, like I said, I started wrestling, picked up golf. That got really big into golf, track and field, all that. So I played a lot of sports. And I say that because, growing up, I wasn't the most talented guy, but I tried really hard. Like I knew I could make it up my talent with hard work. And so that's when kind of my injuries started kickstarting a little bit. It was kind of in high school. I tore my hamstring a couple of times, fractured my ribs, broke my shoulder, broke my ankle, broke my leg, sprained both ankles. And then that's when I went to college, and then I didn't you don't play sports unless you're like a D1, UGA, really.
Right, UGA.
You know, I had some offers maybe to go play at like smaller schools. It's like, no, I'm just gonna go to UGA. So got to UGA, is like, all right, what do I want to do? Then you go towards weightlifting, I guess, at that age, right? If you don't play sports, you go to like I started powerlifting, then kind of transitioned a little bit to Olympic lifting, and then went into CrossFit, and that's when things really started like ramp up in terms of injuries. I had knee pain from high school to college for 5 years. I had low back pain for 4 years. I couldn't sit up in class. I had to lay in the back of class and just lay down for the most of class.
Wow.
I was in that much pain. I had to like sit with my hand behind my back with like a knuckle, just pressing on that spot. And then I tried out for I was like, maybe I do want to play sports. So I tried javelin.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I remember that.
I didn't know that.
I bought a javelin.
This must have been close to when we first met. Rough.
Yeah, this is
somewhat close.
right around junior year in college. I was like, I wanted to really just push it. And, that's kind of who I am. I just like we'll try. I'll just go out there and like compete or do something and kind of push myself. That's, like I said, that's how I've always been. I just kind of push it and kind of like, why not me, or that kind of mentality. So I got a javelin. I drove a sedan at that point, right? So I had it sticking out the top of my car because it couldn't fit in my car. So people knew that was me coming down.
Oh, yeah.
So
there you go.
Blue and orange javelin, a 7-foot thing, 6-foot thing, sticking out the top of my car, going to the track.
Ben's on the way.
Yeah,
so
like, no,
Ben was on the way.
Ben. Yeah, so I did all his crazy workouts. The over the head, snatches, but like
single arm snatches.
Yeah, I did all that
Barbell,
stuff. But reverse deadlifts, where you like pull it from the back, you're like arch the other way, and you're like behind you, like it's like a hack deadlift.
Oh, kind of like a hack squat, but oh wow.
Yeah, crazy like track old school, old school track stuff. And so I started doing that, and like my body started really breaking down. And that was like,
you always commit to whatever you do, whether it's track and field, kinesiology, nutrition. It's like, man, when you dive into something, you dive in deep.
I got pretty good at javelin. I mean, I was throwing it like 60 meters. They wouldn't really look at you until you get to like 70 meters, right? So I was getting good enough for like high school,
right?
Track and field, like that was just me on my own YouTube and stuff like that. But I kept throwing my shoulder out. I was like, this is probably not it for me. Yeah. That's when I really went into CrossFit, and that's when I started getting some pretty bad injuries, like my shoulder all the time from like the muscle ups, things like that, and learning how, like Olympic lifting, but now to like failure, right? Or it's like for reps and stuff like that. So really, I had my knee sleeves, had all that kind of stuff. I had my belts.
I still remember watching you at UGA. I'm like, man, this guy's gearing up for war. You had knee sleeves
and my tape,
belt,
all
everything.
my tape on my wrists and my hands, all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, I pushed, but that really built up and culminated into when I herniated my disc on my back, and that was 2014, right before my first bodybuilding show. And I felt, like people, like, will dispute this, but I was doing like a 20-second hold with like 275 on my back, just holding that bottom position, because this is like holds or like kind of in, and I just felt my back. It was like something like pop, like it's like a small like give, like boom. I was like, that felt really weird. Like it wasn't painful, it was just like, oh, that felt strange. I got up, and all of a sudden I started feeling stuff like down my back, like down my the sciatica feeling. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Let me stretch it out, whatever. Because back then, like this is when I was still foam rolling and stuff, right? And then I think around senior year in high school was when I figured out like foam rolling. So like I would go before class every day to foam roll, just 45 minutes, just so I could function, and it worked. Like I was like, oh, I don't, I'm like, oh, I can move around now. I don't have that much pain and stuff like that. So I was like all into it, like 45 minutes, an hour of foam rolling before class, before my workouts, whatever. I had to get like this warm up in. And it did his job. Like I could function, but I had to always foam roll. Right. I couldn't, like I had to foam roll. It had to like get that feeling out of my body, that pain. And now that we know, I guess more of just it was just numbing that area, right? Kind of smashing.
Desensitizing
exactly.
The muscle spindles.
And so even the pain went away, and I was still. I mean, I was competing, right? I was doing bodybuilding, powerlifting stuff, but So the sciatica got worse. It went down to my hamstring, down to my calf, and then my calf was paralyzed for 2 weeks. Like I just lost function. I had a drop foot.
That's crazy.
Dead foot.
That's like highly clinical.
So my the doctors who saw my MRI was like, "Whoa, you got in a bad car accident." It's like, no, this is weightlifting. They go, no way. Like this is what you see. Like this is really bad. Like your L5, that's when it exploded basically. And I was like very close. I was like uncontrolled bowel movements away from surgery.
Wow.
You know, and so and the doctors are like you know, yeah, you won't be able to deadlift again. You won't be able to squat. Good luck sprinting. You won't be able to do that again. You know, and I was like really, you know, distraught. And I was like, there's got to be a different way. You know, and that's when after my show, we started training in January 2015. Because my show is October 2014.
Gotcha. Okay, so
you know, and then I did like a couple months of PT, you know, traction, all that kind of stuff. Felt good enough to where, all right, time to go into it. And that's when you first started GSP.
Right.
That's when we started.
So the low back injury, that was the main impetus.
That was the thing. I was like, all right, you know, this is crazy now. Because, you know, when I was lifting and working on all this stuff, everyone always said, man, you have such good form. Your technique is so good.
Yeah.
And it's partly because I was doing it, you know, slowly. It looked like I was like thoughtful about it and stuff. But just because, you know, we know now it's slow doesn't mean good.
Exactly.
Right? People think good technique is just slowing it down.
Right.
So I had good technique in terms of like the ordinary person, but I got hurt, and so I was like, if I have that good of technique, why am I still getting hurt?
Right.
You know, I started questioning things, which I think some people, you know, don't. A lot of people don't do. So that's when because I always talked about trying to train with you. Right, I was like, I even like senior year, I was like, hey Joe, I'm gonna get some sessions. And at that point, you know, didn't have that much money, I guess, and I was spending at the bars and stuff in Athens. You know, that was more, you know, important to me.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, I was like, and then you know, I told you like, you know, back then I was like, I thought some of your methods were just flat out wrong. You know, I was like, that is not right. You should not be, you know, bringing your elbows in on your bench press. It should be, you know, straight line down. Like you should be getting that full stretch, all that stuff.
We're going ass to grass.
All that stuff. And that's where I hurt my knee when I was front squatting. 335. You know, my left knee. Right. If I put it in weird position, I feel it. And so, you know, I did that front squat. Something popped in my knee. I was like, oh, that's weird. But yeah, so yeah, you know, I did not believe in your methods, and then, you know, that herniated disc was kind of my last straw. I was like, no, I need to do something different. And so that's when I reached out to you, and from there, that's kind of where led us up to this point.
Yeah, I didn't actually. You just talking about this now, like I knew you were kind of iffy at first, as is everyone when they first see my stuff, but I didn't know you were actually kind of like, wow, almost opposed to it.
Totally
at first.
Opposed. Totally like, this is not right. This is like this is not what the powerlifting standards are.
Yeah.
You know, this is not, you know, the bar path, you have to have the least resistance by going straight up and down, whatever. Like, very, very opposed to that kind of stuff. You know, like that was like, there's other stuff I need to think about, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you became pretty competent at like all of the different disciplines in strength training, whether it was weightlifting, whether it was powerlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit, even strongman to an extent. And when, like we said, when you dive into something, it's not just casual. Like you go all in, you do the research, you do the investigation. And I just know that about you based on our history together. This was, you know, I'm not even talking about then. I just know now. So I know, obviously, you probably did the same thing then. And you were comparing it to like, wow, what this guy's doing, no one else is doing this. Like this couldn't be right. But, you know, we had to follow the science, and I did that, you did that, and you actually started to come to the same conclusions looking at the science.
Yeah, and so then, you know, when I started with you, like you said, I wasn't even in my master's program yet, right? I just got out of college, and I was like still trying to go to medical school. You know, that was my goal, was to go to med school.
That's right.
And I applied, you know, to MCAT, didn't get in, and I was thinking to myself, like, how many times do I want to try to apply to school, or versus getting my life, like, just get it going. And then that's when I, you know, at that point, I think it's like a year in to our training. I was like, man, like I'm feeling really good. Like this is opening my eyes to new things. And I kind of, I worked at a I got a job at a physical therapy clinic during that time too. Just maybe I was like, maybe physical therapy school, something like, because I wanted, like, initially I wanted to go to physical therapy in high school. When I went to college, I changed to medical school and kind of went that route. And I was like, maybe physical therapy. So I worked at Emory. And then, you know, it was great. I learned a lot. And then, you know, so it was cool to seeing that.
I almost forgot all about that. I forgot about this.
Yeah, and then worked there for a couple years, almost 3 years. And I was like, I don't know if this is for me. Like, in terms of, because of what I've experienced with my injuries and how I needed to fix it, you know. And then when I worked there, I was like super conservative. And you know, this is different because, you know, with that clinic, it's, you know, there's cycling patients in and out versus one-on-one, more like like cash-based physical therapists who are a little bit more like custom programs to what you need, not as conservative. Because with these like Emory, like those therapists, the doctors come down too. Like, so if you mess up like that, it's the doctor that's gonna like you have to report to.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to abide by certain things, like especially for insurance too, right? You have to say, I did this in week 4. They had this much flexion, they had this extension.
Right.
We did this exercise, that exercise, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10. So when I got in there, it was like these people. Like I was learning stuff from you. I was like, hey, we need to do some squats. Somebody with squats. Give me 3 sets of 10. They started squatting. I was like, oh, wait. No, sit in your hips. It's like, what does that mean? I was like, here, grab on a chair, sit your butt back. And they're like, whoa, never felt that before. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, I felt my butt. I was like,
yeah.
What? It's like, yeah, I usually feel my knees all the time. I was like,
right.
Yeah, I just have to sit back. And then they're like, wow, no one's ever taught me that before,
Crazy.
It's kind of going to like the programming compared to the actual mechanics, you know, and how like programming is so, people put such a dominant emphasis on the program more than the actual quality mechanics of the reps.
Exactly.
Right. And so there's one guy there. I remember he was there for years. He was like kind of known as the guy who's always there. And the person that I worked with, the physical therapist, she was super busy, so she let me handle. I got to the point where she trusted me, so I took her patients and I would bring them to the floor to kind of like tell them which exercise to do. And then I was like, hey, like with your balance, just turn your feet in, or like, like sit up tall, like work on like getting the outside of your feet.
Right.
And he had like ankle issues that would never go away. And then 3 months in, he was like, dude, I'm feeling way better. Like, and then he was discharged for the first time in like, I think a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah. Like he was the guy, and he was always like, the people did not like working with him. He was always kind of rude and stuff like that, but I think it's because he was in pain all the time.
Yeah, he's just disgruntled.
Right? Yeah, disgruntled, and nothing was helping. And so, and then I was like, I don't mind working with this guy. You just have to tell him what to do, and like, and then when you do it right, it's like, oh yeah, I really feel that. And he and I got along. And 3 months in, he's like out of there.
Wow. Just from small adjustments.
Just small adjustments. And this, I wasn't really, a like full-fledged trainer at that point too. And so that's where like I was like, you know what? Let me at this point, let me get my master's. Let me see what I can do. So I got into grad school, get my master's in exercise science. At that same time, P3 opened up next door, Peak Performance Project, and I got an internship with them as a sports performance specialist. So I was doing Emory, P3, Masters.
This is like a walk. This is like a walk down memory lane.
Yeah,
all this
exactly.
Stuff
like this. That's where I was like, you know what? This is kind of the path I'm going to go towards, kind of modeling towards you. And then that's where I got into my PhD program. And that's where I'm, finishing up hopefully soon. But
you basically only have like your dissertation left.
Yeah,
you've done all your courses, your classes.
Yeah, courses are all done. It's just now like I'm so busy now with like clients. It's.
I don't think you were planning on being this busy with training, but
no, not at all.
As a successful trainer, results speak for themselves, and that's what drives your business.
I haven't had time to post on Instagram in almost more than a year.
Yeah,
it's just my posts like they usually take like 45 minutes an hour to make, and I can't. I mean, I'm so spent after my clients. I need to recharge before my my evening clients that. Now with a wife and 2 dogs and house stuff, it's like
time's a valuable commodity. And when you become
rather,
successable at your craft, you have less and less of it.
I'd rather nap for 45 minutes than do that, because at this point it's really not about the social media for business. My business is good for what I am, because I only have so many hours of the day I can train. So now it's about building my brand out and doing these things. So this podcast stuff is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, no, it's crazy just to hear you kind of, like I said, go back through this memory lane of all these things. It's just recalling in my mind kind of where you've come from. And I mean, it's been cool to see and see your transformation, not just like as a client, because obviously you still train with me, even though you don't need to train with me. We've talked about that. We talked about that just today because we had our session right before this. It's not like you're coming to me to just overhaul your training methods or your technique. It's just for that extra little maybe push or that extra little feedback of looking at your form that maybe you can't see. And just like the way when you're at, or when we have sessions, sometimes I'll ask you to look at my form. I'll do the same thing to you. Hey, can you check this out? It's like you just can't always feel.
You can't see yourself.
You can't see yourself.
That's what I tell my clients. You
can't see yourself. Exactly.
So, and then like today, we had our session like planned. I was like, you know, it's kind of like on one of your basic sessions is like, hey, can we just do something where I can't do this on my own?
Exactly.
So then that's when you started adding eccentric overload or partner assisted stuff, right? That's where like the value you come in to play versus I can do a squat, I can do a bench press, I can do a row on my own, but let's do something where like I can't do it on my own, and so we can add that extra load, extra benefit to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's the thing about being a trainer. We all know that like you got to think on the fly because you can have a game plan, and I can't remember the last time I had a game plan of the exact exercise that I wanted to do going in, and I stuck to that exact game plan. At some point, I had to deviate to some extent just to fit the client's needs for that particular day. And I think a lot of trainers don't do that. They have the game plan. It's all written down. Here's what we're doing no matter what.
Do or die.
Do or die.
Do or die.
Exactly.
We're having to follow the...
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where, you know, I think it's also a mix between the science and art, right? Yeah. So the science is the program, right? But the art's where like, hey, how are you feeling? How are you feeling today? How's your hip? How's your back? How's your foot? How's your arm? Whatever it is.
Right.
And then you're like, all right, well, I have this program, but let's do this differently. Maybe let's do that differently. Let's add something to address these things. And so that means that you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be creative enough to do stuff on the fly.
Right.
And that's where you think, like, you know, when you talk about mastery, I think that's when you get to that level. I don't, like I said, for my clients, I have an idea what I want to do, like, especially because, like, I have a decent amount of memory, so I know their issues.
Right. And
so the night before, I kind of run through all my clients, which ones they need, you know, I have an idea what I want to do. But when they show up, it's like, hey, how are you feeling? You know, if they're great, good, we'll push it. If not, then I'm going to start to address that, you know, but it's a lot of work, a lot of mental work, you know. That's why I try to, like I said, like my nap is more important than trying to post on Instagram because I need to, you know, quiet my mind and recharge to get my, you know, to give my clients the best training they can get.
Yeah. Well, I think too the key is for trainers when it comes to thinking on the fly and modifying the program as is needed or customizing it for that day. In my mind, the key is you have to know what you're looking for, and if you're looking at their body mechanics, you're looking at how their muscles are functioning, you're looking at, you know, what their compensation patterns are for that day, or if they tell you, hey, something feels off, and you start examining their squat, for example, and you can see, you're shifting a little bit to this way. Your brain starts going all these different directions as it should, and you start thinking, okay, this is what they need. Forget that other game plan, and it's all based on how they're functioning. It's all based on their movement mechanics,
their muscle function.
Exactly.
Let's talk about that.
All about muscle function.
It comes down to the muscle function.
It's all about that. Yeah. It's all about that. The technique, their body positioning, their mechanics, and that's what you have to be able to modify according to, not, oh, here's the program for the day, we're sticking to it. And I think a lot of trainers do that. I used to do that back in my undergrad days. And I think the more that we started to tune into the importance of technique, the more that started to go out the window, and the more we realized, hey, we can just change and modify things on the fly based on how the client is performing that day and based on what we see with our eye and what they tell us too. So, and this is even back to some of the subtle adjustments. We mentioned it earlier, and we kind of referenced that, but we didn't dive deep into that. But you're big on the subtle adjustments. I mean, we're all big on subtle adjustments. Even the smallest detail, whether it's posture, foot mechanics, shoulder position. I mean, posture, we see this so much now. We talked about this the other day, how a lot of people in the industry are downplaying the importance of posture, saying, oh, posture's really not that important. Everyone has their own postural habits. And, you know, as long as you adapted or your tissues have had time to adapt, you can kind of use whatever posture you want. And to me, that is absolute insanity because we've seen it in all of our clients. We've seen it in our own bodies. I mean, you've seen it a lot even in your own body with posture. Talk about that a little bit, the posture, the importance of that.
You know, like, I guess maybe my upbringing and like all the sports I played, but I was always in tune with my body, right? And so, you know, when I did a bodybuilding show, no one taught me how to lat spread. Nobody taught me how to, like, you know, do my muscle poses. I kind of just felt through the muscles and did that. And so when I do a row, I can feel you know how I always cramp all the time sometimes? Like if I squeeze really hard, I can make myself cramp, but even without weight.
Right.
I can tune into these like specific feels because of these certain positions. I'm really in tune, maybe from golf or whatever it is. Like I just come in tune with my body and how certain positions can activate certain muscles. And I play around. I experiment all the time on my own. Like I'm like always experimenting, always questioning that. I'm not just running through the exercise. I'm like, well, how does that feel? If I do this tweak, how does that make me feel better or worse? And then, when my clients, when I tell them to get in good posture, I'm like, did you feel that? They go, yes. Every time I put them in a certain position, and I know they won't feel it. They start flaring their elbows in the row. I'm like, you didn't feel your back, did you? Say, no. I was like, squeeze your elbows in, take your chest out, tuck in your core, right? Do all those like cues. And all of a sudden, oh, yep, I feel it. Immediately. Every single person. Doesn't matter if they're like 6'8", 5'2", female, male, whatever, whatever. An athlete, a 70-year-old, just gen pop, a client. Get their posture, it's like, oh yeah, I feel that, and then all of a sudden it starts like cramping because it's one, they probably don't squeeze that muscle as much as they need to, so that novel feeling makes they never felt it, so they kind of cramps a little bit, or it burns more than they've ever felt.
Because you used to be very trap dominant, shoulder dominant. Elevation of the shoulders, probably from the Olympic lifting, powerlifting, just maybe genetics.
Bunch of shrugs.
Yeah, shrugs.
I did so many shrugs in the college, and that's where it kind of led to one of my issues where, I started getting like vertigo. This was senior year, so I would like I knew it because every time I'd get on the bench, I would lay back. And once I lay back, all of a sudden the room would start spinning. It would just start spinning. And I was
on bench press.
On the bench press, just because that lay back position. I haven't touched weight yet. Just me leaning back. I was like, holy crap! And I would just sit there. My head would be doing that. Wow. Like, this is weird, and it didn't go away. And it's I think it was all the shrugs that I was doing because I was trying to develop really big traps. I had bigger traps already. I think from looking back at like old videos or pictures, but I just did a bunch of traps, bunch of shrugs, barbell overhand. They're just like shrugging it up there to the point where I couldn't even like lift up my arm at a certain point. But yeah, so that's where I started getting the vertigo, and then I started realizing, one of my PT friends, he was in PT school at the time. I went over to him, I was like, dude, I can't lift my arm up. I can't like lift it up. I say, hey, roll your shoulders back a little bit, like that, like externally rotate. I was like, oh wow. I could never do that. Then it started like those little moments like clicked for me, of like, if I can do that with my shoulders, then that gives me that range. Like, oh, that's how I can fix this issue. Right. And I show people that all the time. Right. I'll tell them like, if your trap is elevated, you try to externally rotate, you stop right there. Right. But if I pull the shoulder back, I get 15 degrees more of external rotation. But if I shove this up, it goes forward. I'm not trying. If I shove it up, it comes forward. Exactly. Right, because there's a physical, impingement, and that's why people get that frozen shoulder. They get the impingements in that shoulder because they're always trap dominant.
Well, it's interesting because that's where it's like, it's almost creating more stability, creating more muscle stiffness actually opens up your mobility, which people kind of blows their mind. They're like, oh, you don't be too stiff, or you want to have good mobility, so be loose. It's like, no, the body will be in such a poor position. It will want to shut those movements down. Whereas if you actually stay tight, get in the right position, create stability, your body starts to open up its optimal levels of mobility.
I think people mix up flexibility and mobility. Yeah. Right. Mobility is like an actual like a contraction, contraction of the muscle to move that arm or move that limb, whatever it is. Yeah. Versus flexibility where you just stretch the crap out of that arm or whatever you need to. You just stretch it out. And that's that's why a lot of my clients, when they get more strength, more stability, they get more mobility too. Right. Right. And so I had a client like back in my like LA Fitness days where he took like Advil every single day for the past like 7-8 years. I didn't know this until like a couple months in. It's like, hey, stop taking Advil just try it out for a week. Stop taking Advil, because when he was desensitizing his pain receptors, right? Yeah, we don't want that. He didn't know that he was like causing more damage because you don't feel the pain. So like, hey, so I want you to feel the pain. I want that to be a lesson for you, because that's how I always took pain as. It was like, I'm doing something wrong. How do I change it? And I use my pain to guide me. Right, that's what our bodies have, these pain receptors, that pain sensitivity, muscle spindles, Golgi tendons, all that stuff to help us, navigate, our movements. And so I told him, hey, stop taking the Advil just for like a week, and let's see what happens. And so then I started really like, he would do RDLs, he'd feel his lower back. I was like, get that shoulders back, squeeze your core and pinch your shoulders back. We did it. All of a sudden, he can touch his toes after the week. Right. He could never touch his toes before that for 10 years, even longer than that probably. But all of a sudden he's like, whoa, all my pain's gone. I can touch my toes now. Because getting posture, right? And that increases mobility. Exactly. So
max tension.
Max tension.
Mobility.
Yes, exactly. It's not, that muscle stiffness, like you said, max tension, that full body tension, that's what allows the body to oftentimes do what it needs to. And sometimes the best cue to give a client, it's like once they're pretty locked in and you've kind of fixed and resolved some of their general biomechanical issues, sometimes the best cue after that is just stay tight. Stay tight, use more effort, more intensity.
I say brace.
Yeah, brace, exactly.
Brace really hard.
And sometimes that just brings everything together because it creates that co-contraction. We talk about this a lot. I don't want the audience to get overly confused with this topic because you can get pretty deep. But the co-contraction is basically where you're squeezing into the position by activating all of the muscles around that targeted region.
That's going to help with the sensitivity receptors.
Yeah, because your muscle spindles are activated more.
And then you can fine tune everything.
Exactly, exactly. I know we've talked a lot about but yeah, no, that full body tension. I think a lot of people don't tune into that enough. And it's tough to create full body tension if you're programmed in your mind that you have to go through this excessive range of motion, because one of the first things you sacrifice, for example, on an ass to grass squat, once you go past 90, you just had to sacrifice some full body tension. So now if I'm telling you, hey, create full body tension, well, you can only create so much full body tension because you just sacrificed a good portion of that depending on the degree of depth that you went to beyond 90 degrees. So, all this stuff comes back to the fundamentals, and we're always talking about the fundamentals, even though we go deeper into other topics, but it's like posture, core, feet, stay tight, brace. Like if you do those things and you do them with maximal intensity and focus, it's like, man, that's 90% of the battle.
Yeah. I mean, that's what my clients is really just focus. I'm teaching you how to like almost focus, but also bracing is like, it's I always say integrate, don't isolate.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's so isolated right now into their movements. That's not how our body works. When one thing contracts, the other thing will, reciprocally elongate.
Exactly.
Right. But it's always under contraction. You don't want to have one side firing tighter than the other side, because then you'll be in out of alignment. Because that's what the force coupling of you think about your shoulder blades. You have the lats, right? The lower lats pulling one way. You have the serratus pulling the other way. You have the traps pulling the other way to create stability. Like I always talk about, like think about a bridge, right? You can see those cross cables, right? You don't have a cable pulling one side, the other side. You have cross cables that pull across each other to create tension there. Right, and that's where the alignment comes from, or compensation patterns come from. When you have one muscle pulling more than the other muscle, that's where you start getting these compensations. People say, "Oh, you're quad dominant," right? "Oh, I always have knee pain because I'm quad dominant." That's because they don't fire up their glutes or they don't fire their hamstrings to co-contract those. We
talk a lot about like joint centration. It's kind of like we were talking about like muscle centration. Now everything's kind of stacked in alignment. Like you said, not one side.
So that's why like when I teach somebody, I say integrate. How much full body tension can you create when you do this exercise? Right. Yeah, there's some things, yes, when you do a curl, right, you're going to be a little more isolated. Right. And there's still benefits to curl. But even then, I tell my clients, pull your shoulders back, because a lot of them, when they get tired, they'll start rounding their shoulder forward, right? Rotation. So what are you really working? You're working that bicep, you're working the internal rotators, right? You're working the rotator cuffs, right? So I tell them, hey, keep your shoulders back, pinch your core, stay tight, right? Keep your elbows in front of you and start curling. But do not move that shoulder. Press through this position here, right? So even though it's isolated, it's still integrated. So that's why I teach.
This is huge, and this is even back to, you kind of mentioned it, obviously everything you just mentioned, but proprioception. We talk about this a lot with our clients. We talk about it a lot with our own training, being able to tune into our sense of feel so much that we don't always have to rely on a trainer or coach telling us how to fine tune the positions. But one of the things that this comes down to is the muscle spindles giving us feedback. You mentioned the muscle spindles earlier, but one of the things that people forget with muscle spindles is they don't just respond to amount of stretch and rate of stretch. They respond to muscle stiffness. That's really how you turn on a muscle spindle, which that's your proprioceptive feedback, meaning if you want to have good sense of feel, you first have to create a lot of full body tension and stiffness and bracing. So this is one of the reasons our clients have success and they're able to change and modify their body mechanics so quickly and get almost immediate results within even a day or two. It's because that sense of feel is heightened because we teach full body tension early on. We teach that posture alignment. Then your sense of feel is through the roof. They start feeling things that they've never felt. Like you said, it's man, my back. It's like, wow, I'm firing things I've never fired. But again, you start pushing that mobility and range of motion too much, all that goes out the window.
Well, I mean, think about someone rolling their ankle, right?
Yeah.
You roll your ankle. What do? Your body goes limp. If you have some sort of process, I mean, even not, it's a reaction.
Yeah.
You roll your ankle, your body goes limp. Why?
Yeah.
Because it senses some sort of maybe injury. Because pain isn't just injury; it can also be the anticipation of injury.
Right.
And so your body has these protective mechanisms that when you roll an ankle outside of its range, that it is stable, it will shut down function. Because if you keep it tight, it will rip something. Right. So that's what's a protective mechanism. So we know that there are certain ranges where your body will shut down because the leverages are off.
Exactly.
Right. Your cross bridges, they're not as many cross bridges.
Exactly.
Certain physiological features just don't work that way.
Exactly. Well, I think people forget that the body not only sends a lot of activation signals, but it can send a lot of inhibitory signals depending on, like you said, if you're in the wrong position, you're in outside that optimal range, it'll start to shut the movement down.
And it's also guarding too.
Yeah.
So when people are in pain, especially low back pain, it'll guard. It will prevent you from doing like leaning over because it understands that you're unstable.
Right.
And so what it also does that do? It shuts down your glutes from firing. That's why people, when you look at every single Instagram post, hey, if you have low back pain, fire up your glutes, fire up your core. Right? Because it will start shutting down. Because the more you fire up your glutes, and if you don't have the right alignment, you'll actually use your back, and that actually will send pain signals to it. So that's why when I have my clients who have like back pain, I actually have them do bridges, holds, right? And I don't want them to just bridge that. I want them to squeeze their glutes so hard that it cramps it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to almost tell your body, hey, it's okay, I got this. Let me, you have to change the way your body is protecting itself. Remember, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing like overhead squats and stuff like that, and I kind of hurt my wrist, and my bicep shut down. Do you remember that?
Yeah, briefly.
So like I hurt this wrist. It was like really painful to turn. Right. So when I would turn my arm, my bicep wouldn't move.
Oh wow.
Like I would turn it. I was like, oh, Joel, what's this? So this one would move, and I would turn this one. It was dead because if this created more turn, right? If this contracted, it would torque on this wrist.
Right.
It would create pain. So then my body tried to guard it, and by not getting my biceps to fire up when I turn my wrist. So I was still turning, but without any torquing.
Right.
And so I was like, man, I started squeezing my arm, and as I got better, then my muscle function came back a little more, right? But it actually shut down my bicep from actually contracting when I would turn my arm. So like I said, all those experiences, things like that, just add to how I train and my philosophy on training.
We've talked about this even with some of our other guests, but you, me, and obviously Ben, we all have pretty sensitive bodies. You have a very sensitive body stemming back from even high school, just discussing the injuries and how things started manifesting pretty early on if you weren't doing things right. But that sensitivity or that kind of more potential of creating injuries if you don't do things right, in my mind, that's actually a good thing if you're really trying to master the art of movement, because you're almost forced to. It's either you stop training or you keep training because you do it right. There's no in between. And I think a lot of people can get away with faulty mechanics, at least for a few years or maybe even a decade. And they're like, hey, I'm feeling fine. You're telling me not to go deep. I've been going deep for 5 years, no knee pain. But eventually it catches up to everyone.
Our bodies are really resilient.
Yeah.
Right. Our bodies, it repairs itself. We have all this, the cartilage, the meniscus, right? It can take on a bunch of this load until it can't really. Like you'll see like these century, the bikers, one that do 100-mile, rides. Later on, they don't have any cartilage left in their knees from a activity that's really not that much load bearing, right? They always say running's bad for you. Then how are your knees? How do you have no meniscus left?
Yeah.
And how you have no cartilage left just from biking.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why like a lot of my clients too, the healthy ones, the one that come to me with no pain, they always sometimes push back on my corrections, right? Because they're like, why do I need to be so detailed with this? Like, why do I need to do this or that? Like, but the ones that come in with pain, I can fix most of their pain almost within a session.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least get them feeling something crazy different.
Sure.
And there's a quick buy-in to it. They're like, wow, I've never felt that before. Yeah, my back pain is gone. Like I've because I've dealt with the back pain, so I know what to do to where, wow, that gave me a lot of relief.
Yeah.
And I know exactly when they do that movement, I was like, that felt better than it. They go, yeah, it actually did, because I went through it.
Right.
I say this all the time. You can't teach what you don't know, right? If you haven't experienced some of the stuff that the pain that I've dealt through, a textbook won't teach you. It'll tell you certain protocols, but when you felt that pain, that guarding, and the almost a lack of wanting to work that muscle. You won't know how to teach it, and you almost be afraid of it when your client says ow. It's like, oh no, stop, let's do something else. When I'm like, no, your knee caved in, push your knee out. That's why it hurt, right? Or your knee, you went forward on your knee. We need some tibial translation. We need on our squats, right? The knee will go forward, but if it's the only thing going forward, and there's no hip hinge, you're gonna pressure your knee. And some people maybe have a previous injury, right? That will trigger a response, a pain response. Right, but whenever I say, "Hey, sit back," fire your core, feel your groin, feel your adductors fire up. They're like, "Oh yeah, it completely went away." Exactly. Right. So,
no, those are huge points, and I mean, even early on when we were talking about you getting into training, this was several years back. One of the reasons I told you would be good at training is because of all the injuries you had to deal with. Just like one of the reasons exactly. I mean, you understand the value of good movement. What's the one quote from Captain America? Only a weak man understands the value of strength. Well, only a sickly person understands the value of health. We've all been in that state of being sickly in terms of our muscle function and our body mechanics and our joints, to the point that we can truly appreciate and tune into what it feels like to be in good health.
I'm not trying to, talk down on any of these Instagram, whatever trainers, but when you're 20 years old, and the trainer is like, yes, you'll probably have abs, you'll probably have these muscles, whatever. But when you are, an adult, a working adult, with a family and all these things that they have to deal with, the stressors of life, can you still get them the same results, right? Are your methods still effective? Right. And so when you are young, you can get to it. You see some crazy stuff on Instagram, right? On social media, some crazy stuff. And usually they're younger.
Yeah.
You don't really see that many people who are 40 plus doing some of these things, right? Because their bodies would feel it. And is it bad? I don't think so. I think they're just more sensitive to things in a good way.
Yeah.
But also maybe some of the past injuries have caught up. But that's our way of protecting ourselves,
right?
Our protective mechanisms. And so you'll see people doing these crazy. I was talking to this guy today about he popped a rib. I was like, "Whoa, what'd you do? Did you get you play football or something?" He's like, "No, I was doing leg press." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, I was going knee to chest, and it just popped." I was like, wow. I
haven't heard of that either.
Popped
crazy.
A rib. I've seen quad tendons tear on leg presses and stuff like that. I was like, I don't know. I pushed some pretty heavy weight, and I've never been close to that.
Rib popping.
Rib popping. It's like what? That's cool.
But it also kind of makes sense because again, you go that deep on any type of compound leg movement, whether it's a squat or leg press. It's like, man, you have to sacrifice so much tension in your core and your spine. Something's going to give, whether it's their knee, whether it's their rib, whether it's their groin, something's going to give. You have so many energy leaks. It's just a matter of what's going to give first based on maybe genetic predisposition for whatever is weakest in their body. It's great. And we talk about this all the time, just this era of these fitness and Instagram influencers, and it's all fluff and fancy training, and it's no substance, and it's things that they showcase because they're young,
right?
But that's not going to optimize any stimulus.
We talked about this too, right? It's one thing to train yourself, it's another thing to train other people.
Yes.
And if you can do those methods with other people, great. But I get a lot of clients who come to me after these boot camp classes and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, my back hurts all the time, my knee hurts all the time. We're just pushing through. Yeah, I have an 8-pack, whatever. I lost 20 pounds, but I can't squat 45 pouns. Squatting 65 pounds a bar hurts me. I get these clients all the time, and there's no mastery there. People always say hey, I'm in the gym all the time, I might as well be a trainer. It's like, look, you go and train some people, train them, use methods, do they work or not? Right. Exactly. I think that no one's gonna. People call you out all the time, like, "Oh, you pay them to come train with you." It's like,
I love that.
They're not going to. They're not going to do that. People are paying you money. And if they don't like what they're feeling, if they don't like the results, they're not going to stay there.
Yeah.
They don't have, this is America. This is, they'll
especially pro athletes. I mean, they're so inundated in their methods.
That is their career.
Exactly.
That is their livelihood. You really think they're going to jeopardize their livelihood? Yeah. For the certain unorthodox training that they don't think is making them feel better.
Right. And they're pro athletes are a creature of habit. For a decade or more, this is how they've trained. They've trained a certain way. To get them to buy into something that's totally different than what they're used to, that goes against their traditional habits,
it's like there's value.
You know there's value. You know it's got to work, because it's like there's no way they're committing to this entirely different protocol unless they felt something very substantial and significant. Because again, these guys, they don't want to have to change their entire strategy for what they've been doing that got them to a certain place unless they have to.
Exactly.
Speaking of athletes and athletics, you're quite the athlete yourself. I mean, you've played so many different sports. You've participated in a lot of different athletic activities. Currently, you're working on your golf game, but a specific area of your golf game. Discuss that a little bit.
I've always swung the club really hard and all that stuff, and I was like, long drive is becoming a more mainstream. I was like, maybe I should try a long drive. I don't score really well. I don't play enough to score well, right? I've played since I was in 5th grade, 6th grade. But it's golf is a game you have to play all the time. The feels like you can hit the ball really well, you have a good swing, but once you get to the green, I can hit a 350-yard drive and then chunk the chip twice, right? And so end up with a bogey when the guy next to me hits it 250 and gets a par on the hole, right? So it's like, maybe let me try a long drive. So I started, mixed around a long drive a little bit, got a long drive club, and been practicing that. It's pretty cool. It's like it's just pure explosiveness, pure power,
But it's also a lot of mobility, and people
crazy.
Would say that you don't train mobility, Ben. You're only training 90 degrees. You shouldn't be able to swing a golf club like this. Yet you're demonstrating significantly better mobility and quality of movement than most people that stretch and do all this mobility training.
I haven't done a day standard stretch in 15 years now, right?
That's funny. I hope people tune into that. You haven't done a stretch in 15 years. You haven't foam rolled in 10, 11, 12 years.
Yeah, the only time we use foam roll is when we do it for planks or for
exactly, like an actual exercise. Tool. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I swing the club. My best swing so far is 137 miles per hour. 380 distance. That's pros are hitting it right.
You're not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
380 yards. So you're basically 20, maybe 30 yards away from actually being able to compete legitimately
amateur.
In long drive,
and
actually possibly even make a small career out of this.
And like I said, I don't do any rotation work. Right, I do the opposite. I do anti-rotation. Right. A lot of planks, a lot of holds.
Core stabilization.
And we kind of talk about this too. Could I benefit from a little bit more rotation? Maybe. But I'm also I'm swinging it faster than 90% of the pros out there. Right. I'm up with I guess Rory, Scotty, those good long hitters. And it's but I don't do any of that standard golf workout. I don't do any of that, right? Because honestly, with all when you're practicing in the simulator, you're turning all the time. That's your turn, right? What I tell people is the weight room is not gonna get you better at golf swing. Practicing your golf swing will get you better at golf swing. Your technique will get you actually more speed. You being a fundamentally sound athlete will get you the parameters, will get the stepping stones, to swing the club as fast as you want to swing it, or explosive you want to swing it without any pain, right? But that's what we focus on, is being a fundamental, foundational athlete. Capable of exploding. Handling a lot of loads, stresses, because that long drive swing is completely different than the ones you're seeing on TV. It's pure explosiveness. You turn as hard as you can, you get the club up as high as you can, and you unleash it. Using ground force reaction and all that. The stuff that we are learning now with force plates.
And there's a ton of torque on your spine. And if your spine wasn't healthy, and we're talking about you had an exploding discs.
Someone who told me I would not deadlift again because of my disc. And and I'm doing something that's taxing
Yes.
it maybe just the most out of anything, to be completely honest.
That should be be impossible for you to do given the current state of your spine. I say current state because it's not like your spine fully healed itself. What healed itself or fixed itself is your muscle function. And sometimes these injuries, we talked about this, we tell athletes this all the time. It's like, that injury might not ever fix itself internally, like at the structural level of the cartilage or the joints, but what will improve tremendously is the muscle function and the muscles functioning around the joint, so much so that it will be as if that injury does not exist and you'll be functioning at a high level. And that's exactly what's going on with you. And that's what we get all of our clients and athletes to do. And, you're not, some of the other things you can do is pretty crazy. You've done 335-pound barbell squat jumps, landing back in the squat, the 90-degree position, and catching some decent air. I mean, I've never seen anyone do that heavy of a squat jump. And again, like, your spine should not be able to handle that. You can squat way over 500 pounds, deadlift way over 500 easily, and your spine is fine. In contrast to that, if you did like a 135 or 225 deep squat and did that frequently for a few weeks, like, what do you think would be the results?
Actually, I played around with that for a little bit, and it just feels a little bit like I feel pressure in certain joints.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of go back into like my dysfunction almost. Like, I'll just favor one side more. Like my knee will start to kind of ache a little bit more. My back will start to ache a little bit more. It's not that I can't do it.
Right.
It's just like it doesn't feel great. Right.
But imagine doing that for a year.
Right. And so then, I'll probably have to go back to like maybe the foam roller or whatever to,
exactly.
Desensitize the body. But
reminds me of when I did Zack Tielander's program. Remember I did that? Because he challenged me to doing his program. And, and then I did his, he did mine. I posted it. I posted all 8 workouts. But it's not like I couldn't do the program.
Right.
Okay. I could do it. Now, was I squatting the ultimate ass to grass squat that they were looking for? Well, first off, I don't use weightlifting shoes. I don't use a belt. So to really get true depth that everyone wants you to get, this ultra deep ass to grass squat, you really have to have a weightlifting shoe on to elevate the heel. But regardless, I was able to do it, but it's like each progressive workout, I felt a little worse. A little worse. Started to get a little stiffer. My mobility actually started to get worse. It didn't get better. It got worse. My best workout was the first workout because that's when my body was the healthiest. And the farther I went in that training program, the worse my body felt. I think that's what you're saying too. That's kind of what the
top, like if you talk about powerlifting workouts, when they start using blocks, right?
Yes.
And like kind of reducing those range of motions it's like, whoa, what do you got? Like, the box squats or the blocks on your chest, it's like, what is that really doing? Take that away. Take that block away. And what their joint angle is doing.
Right. Yeah, it's
you see what I'm saying?
90. Yeah.
Right. And so I think you get a lot of that going on. But like when I sometimes do like a bench press and I'll go too deep, right? I used to have elbow pain and shoulder pain all the time.
I remember.
Like, all the time. Like, that was a thing. Like, I would just do skull crushers or lat pull, tricep extensions, even my bench press. It would just be there all the time. I think I taped it up one time during the powerlifting competition. I remember I have a video of that. Like, I just have a tape wrapped around my elbow.
Right.
Because it hurt all the time.
Right.
Nowadays, I don't have pain. I'm still bench pressing the same thing.
Yeah. No,
was back
you're
then.
bench pressing more. I was about to bring that up. You're stronger now training just for optimal muscle function and optimizing body mechanics. You're stronger now handling more weight than you were when you were actually training powerlifting style. Yeah. And again, it just goes back to the importance of movement, and whether it's golf, whether it's you're trying to compete in powerlifting or even CrossFit, baseball, football, it's like if you master the fundamental human movement patterns, those big 7 movements, the squat, hinge, lunge, horizontal push-pull, vertical push-pull, it's like, man, it transfers to everything. You will be a better mover at whatever you want to use it with.
I mean, you can argue some of those guys, like those even CrossFit guys, they have some decent movements, the ones that are really good. Right? You have to. Because if not, you would tear down. Kind of like the athletes kind of growing up, like those younger athletes, right?
Genetically great athletes.
If you're not moving well, luckily, you'll probably tear an ACL or have some sort of injury. Versus those people that just kind of move well. They probably ran on the field as a kid, without shoes on or whatever. They had just good foot activation, good quality, like biomechanics. They probably they have less injuries there.
Right.
And so, but like some of those guys have some decent, like I remember like Rich Froning, right? like
good technique.
Technique
Very
was just
good
great.
Yeah.
He was lasted for a long time.
Well, he sat back and it was hips better on his squat than probably most people did.
Right.
Like even today they would say, "Oh, shift your knees forward more." It's like, well, no, his squat clearly worked pretty well for him.
They always said he had that little early elbow bend and stuff like that, but it's probably just his body type. But probably kept him healthy. That's anecdotal. That's observational. We can't really get into it. Like, did that really save him? But at a certain point, you get so much data, that you're like, there's got to be something there.
Right.
And that's kind of where the research sometimes they go too deep into the rabbit hole. Yeah. And I tell my clients, like, real life isn't a lab. Right. There's so many factors that go into certain activations of muscles, certain pains. A 12-week study is not going to tell you anything substantial in terms of like, oh, did that hurt your knee or not? Right? Because we know people can go 10 years without knee pain, and all of a sudden their knee pain's here. Right. They have a torn meniscus.
Yeah. Or that cartilage have just worn down enough over time. Right. They didn't notice it. Now
they're feeling it.
Exactly.
They've been desensitized all those years.
And I even told you a little bit about this when you went into your master's program for kinesiology. I was kind of like, hey, you're going to come across some studies that they're going to discuss in class trying to push this notion that, hey, we found a study on squats where maybe it showed that going deeper you had more activation this way, or maybe going deep acid grass squats didn't necessarily destroy the knee. And it's like you got to look deeper into the research and realize sometimes these research studies are highly flawed, and oftentimes they actually kind of tilt and slant the statistics the way they want it to come out.
Got to put the pieces together. Got to put the pieces together. We talk about it. A lot of the times the literature out there, it's not going to be in that one article because they're not putting it together. Exactly. If you put the pieces together, you realize 90 really is optimal.
Exactly. Sure. And like same thing with body mechanics and oftentimes in these research studies, they don't train the participants like they need to. They don't go over technique. They don't explain to them, hey, here's how you need to do it. And we know this, that if you don't have good technique on a squat, for example, to get your glutes to activate, you're going to have to go deep to get some semblance of posterior chain activation. Or you could just do the squat right, go to 90 degrees, learn how to set your hips back, brace your core, set your hips back from the beginning, and guess what? You're going to have that same, if not higher levels of activation going to 90 than you would going deep, and you're not going to have the tension on your joints.
I've basically had to teach every single one of my clients how to run.
Yeah.
How to squat, right? These things are like, you think they're innate. You think they're like people know how to do these things. Oh yeah, just go do your squat. Or hey, go jog real quick. And I'll look over and they're heel striking, and some people say that's okay. No. I don't, there's research enough to tell you that you're having braking forces when you're heel striking. Why do you think all the shoes have these like big heels, right, to absorb the force? They're so squishy and bouncy, right? And then people when we wear them, they're like, oh, my knee pain's gone away. Right. Sure, but your technique is still poor. Right. People are always like, oh, running's bad for my knees. Like, no, bad technique is bad for your knees.
Yes, exactly.
And so I have to teach people how to run. And all of a sudden, I'll like, hey, gotta lift your leg up. Pretend like you're like running over hurdles, right? You activate those hamstrings, those reflexes, those hip flexors. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I've never felt my butt before. I've never felt my glutes activate. My glutes are actually sore from running now. Yeah. My core is sore from running because they have to like lift the leg up versus just being like, backside dominant. Now they have some front side mechanics.
Something that, just to clarify for the audience too, is, and this, we all know this, but to try to change someone's running form without first addressing their fundamental movement patterns, like their squat, their hinges, their lunge, good luck with that.
Very hard.
Very tough to do unless they're a great athlete. Then you can do it. But once you've taught them just a few basic cues of, hey, here's what it feels like to turn on your glutes and activate your feet on a squat and a lunge, then they kind of have a basic idea. Then you go over the running form with them. It's like, oh, okay, I've experienced that activation before. Now it's a lot easier to turn it on.
I would push back a little bit on that. Yeah. Kind of because like we kind of talk about like the running, we think it's innate, and it kind of is, right? In terms of like, if you were to like just fall, I mean, you look at kids, right? No one's taught a kid how to run, but you look at their technique and it's usually pretty spot on. It's when they get a little bit older, it goes away. Yeah. When I tell them how to run, like lift their legs up, it's like, okay, it's there. Yes, will they get more out of it when they know how to activate their feet, when they get their, their glutes stronger, hamstrings stronger, a little more mobility, more, strength in the hip flexors. Yeah. But I take some of my newer clients, I'm like, hey, let me show you your jog. And I'll kind of show them, it's not pretty, but they start to feel these things that are like, oh yeah, this is how running should be. It's efficient. I'll put them on the curve, and all of a sudden those just start running. Those like pick up speed because it's just efficiency, right? Yeah. It's your body's when you lift that hip flexor, like if you lift that left leg up, right, as high as you can, that right glute's going to fire up.
No.
Because it's a byproduct. It's a co-contraction.
Right.
When you have one foot or one leg go up, the other one's going to fire back.
Right.
Right. If you have one arm swing forward, the other one's going to go back. So yes, they will feel more when they get they understand hinges and they build up their strength and they understand foot mechanics.
Right.
But I can, when I teach them, they're like, yeah, actually, that felt totally different. Yeah. That felt almost effortless.
Right.
Versus if I was laboring, I felt my knees. I just felt slow. It felt cumbersome.
Well, I think you've done a lot of investigation on proper sprint mechanics.
Yeah.
So you probably are able to cue people a little bit more than someone like maybe me or Jonathan or somebody. You probably do it even more than I do. If you're not an expert in track and field performance with sprinting, well, then you're going to have to rely a little bit more on mastering the fundamental human movement patterns before the client will be able to demonstrate decent sprint mechanics. But like you said, if you really know how to teach sprinting, then you can probably start correcting a lot earlier than that.
And like I said, you teach what you know, right? And I used to pull my hamstrings all the time when I did like sprints, stuff like that. Until and I would do all the hamstring curls and Nordic curls, It wasn't until I understood, getting my core, tucking my core and kind of getting rid of that anterior pelvic tilt, getting more front side mechanics, because I was always, had too long, I overstrided. I was always pushing back. I wasn't lifting my leg up high enough. And you're not really lifting. It's like a byproduct of you, pushing into the ground and attacking like a piston versus like a swing set, right?
Makes sense.
Once I started understanding that, then I could attack the ground. And I haven't pulled my hamstring in years.
Right.
I haven't complained about a hamstring pull in a long time. Before it used to be all the time, to the point I was like, you know what? Maybe this I guess can't sprint. Until I was like, no, there's something going on. And so I fixed my technique, and I think that's where some people are. You see all these injuries now. Like we have all this data, all this science on hey, we need to get this hamstring fired up more. We need to have this in certain ranges. We need to build it in certain ranges. This is how we're going to prevent hamstrings from being pulled. Yet why there's still hamstring pulls? There's studies out there, especially soccer players. There's more hamstring pulls now, but exercise science has grown. The field of PT has grown. All these industries have grown. So why are we still having these injuries? Are actually coming up now. And we talked about this before. I was like, I never heard about so many Achilles tears.
You see it so much more
quad
now.
tendon tears, stuff like that. These tendons are very strong.
Yeah.
And yes, our athletes are stronger and faster, but we've seen the data too. They're not that much stronger or that much faster.
Right. Yeah.
Right. We've seen that it's like maybe
in proportion to their level of strength they've gained.
Maybe like they did the track and field study was like actually it was maybe the surface that wasn't as good, or the cleats, whatever.
Right.
Like the technology wasn't as good.
Yeah.
They're not that much faster.
Right.
But why are we getting more injuries?
Right.
And so that's where
I took my athletic training classes, literally probably about 20 years ago, the discussion on Achilles ruptures was so minimal because it was so rare and fluky. Now it's like, you see it every week almost. And what have we been pushing more and more? We've been pushing more mobility. And what's the result of this? It's more tears, more ruptures, more non-contact injuries.
You'll hear those Achilles tears with the weekend warriors that go play softball, right? The ones that are not trained.
Yeah.
It's a whole other topic when you have trained athletes and they're starting to rip their tendons.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then who's safe from it?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, there's been a little bit of a renaissance of this old school style training. People are like, hey, look at these guys back in the day.
Yeah.
They jumped around, they did this stuff.
Yeah, you see that on Instagram a lot.
Nothing fancy, right? And there is science is important, technology is important. That's how we push things, forward. But what if we're asking the wrong questions?
Yeah.
What if we're looking down the wrong path? What if we have to, take a step back in order to move forward?
Yeah.
And that's why, you can get down this rabbit hole, and all of a sudden, all these recovery methods are this. Everyone has to recover. If you're not inflaming your body all the time, if you're dealing with stress, if you're sleeping enough, if you're eating proper whole foods, if you're training and not breaking down your body, prioritizing technique and not volume, right? Or my frequency, intensity, whatever. You won't be so susceptible to these injuries. Versus everyone out there is getting these especially from different pundits or opinions out there, because now social media is everywhere, right? So we're able to look at, hey, low back pain, click on the hashtag, all these people come up. And the people with the best marketing, the best social media will probably be up there.
Yes,
right.
Sure.
And
Great
so
point.
we're starting to lose out on, I guess, authority, because now everyone has a voice.
Right.
And that's okay. That's fine. Especially if you believe in what you believe. But we need to have I always say we have to have like harder tests.
Yeah.
Like CSCS, NASM, whatever.
Yeah.
We need to have more standards in the industry to where you don't have these people who come in as a hobby, because this stuff is actually kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
Weightlifting can be the best thing ever happen, and actually it is. Actually, the research is starting to prove that, right?
Yeah.
The more muscle you have, the better your bone density, the better your hormone regulation. I mean, everything, right? Fat loss, whatever. But it can also be the worst thing that can happen to you. And I see it all the time. These people are in the gym just like wrecking their bodies every day, not knowing, thinking they're doing something good, when in the end they're actually going to get an impingement in their shoulder or get a frozen shoulder because of how their posture, they're reinforcing that posture, and they're doing these stretches and thinking and we talked about this too. I'm not against stretching. I'm against passive techniques. I like active stretching, right? Activating certain muscles in RDL versus sitting there, putting your leg on a table and stretching that leg out. Because we know that type of passive stretching isn't really stretching the muscle body. You're starting to stretch the connective tissue. And that's where your body starts to say, I don't like that stretch. I'm going to guard. I'm going to tighten up that muscle because I feel instability. Like I said, when you roll your ankle and your body feels instability, it'll guard. It'll tighten up. It'll make your body loose, and it'll seize up that ankle. But when you're starting to stretch and reciprocal inhibition and all these things, you're not getting what you need to get out of it. You're just getting more instability in your joints. Versus when we stretch, we do RDLs for a hamster. We don't bend over and touch your toes. I can touch my toes. I used to not be able to touch my toes. I stretched every day in high school to try to touch my toes. I could not get past my shins. I stopped stretching for 15 years. I can touch the ground now with my hands.
Because you just train an optimal range of motion when you do your hinges.
Right, exactly. And I'm actually stretching the muscle body out, right? Because I'm activating, I'm bracing, I'm engaging, and that muscle tugs on the on the tendons too. But it's about the activating the motor units in the muscles to create that stretch, making it more of a rubber band than like a plank of wood.
Exactly. Well, I mean, muscles like to be stretched, and like you said, you're not against stretching.
I'm not against stretching,
but muscles like to be stretched in a very precise range. The only way you can find that precise range is if you're actively engaging your nervous system and trying to stretch the muscles at the same time, and you're using the opposite muscles with co-contraction, and then you're telling your body, hey, this is the exact amount of stretch I want you to go through, and your body accepts that stretch rather than rejects it, because it's like, whoa, I have an outside force trying to pull me into this overly lengthened position. Then it tightens up again, like you said. That's how you get tight, is overstretching.
I've heard so many stories, right? People like going to a massage and they get more tight after something that's supposed to get them loose. Why? Because it's an outside force pressing on the muscle, trigger points, whatever. But they don't know the amount of pressure you need, right? And so they can overdo it. And once your body feels that, I'm sure people who've gotten massages, they know when they press on something really hard, your body stiffens up. You start sweating.
Exactly.
That's not relaxing. That's stiffening your body up because it senses that pain. So that, like I said, I am all for active stretching. Passive is when you start getting at, you're not really getting much out of it necessarily. Yes, it can get you more range in your elbow, especially if I think we've started applying principles of physical therapists when someone gets an injury, right? Yes, you can start to stretch that joint out a little bit more because it's gotten stiff, right? Inflammation, whatever, right? But you can still, you can argue you can do that with active stretching too. But I'm not against this passive stretching, but I'm against it in terms of for activation. And so I am, I get into this a lot with other trainers. I am all for mobility work, but what you're doing is flexibility work, not mobility work, right? And why are a lot of these mobility experts usually females? Right? They're a little more flexible and they can do some of the crazier movements that get a lot of clicks and stuff like that, right? But like I said, I have enough mobility to swing a golf club 130 miles per hour plus. Right. And how much more do I need? Maybe a little more if I'm trying to get up to 140, 150 to compete with the big guys. But really, how much do I need? Or can I get more explosive? Can I get better with my technique?
Well, I think it's always down to you want to optimize mobility, not maximize mobility. It's like maximal mobility is not going to do anything for you unless you're a figure skater or like you're a ballet dancer or a gymnast who needs to demonstrate these excessive levels of range of motion for movements that are aesthetically pleasing to the eye, but not necessarily functional. We're talking mainly about functional movements in sports where you want a balance between mobility and stability.
And I say, at what point do you stop?
Yeah, exactly.
When you stretch, when do you stop? Like after years, you keep going, you keep stretching. Is it when your head touches your shin? Is that when it's okay? Or you have to go past that, right? Or you can be a contortionist.
Yeah.
Right. What point is enough?
Exactly.
And I usually will tell them, grab a weight, do an RDL. That's enough.
Yeah.
Right. Well, something where you can stay loaded, and then when you let that weight go, sure, go ahead and bend down, and touch your shoes.
Now you can do it exactly.
Whatever is unloaded, but at what point is enough?
Just keeps going.
Yeah.
Just keeps going. I know from experience when we stretched, it just kept going. There was no end.
End to it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but even like, if you want to talk about optimizing your mobility, a lot of our clients, they're more mobile. They can squat deep when they have to, body weight, now that their tissues are healthy. If you want to restrict range of motion, start creating a lot of inflammation, which often comes from pushing your range of motion and your mobility boundaries. That makes you feel stiff and inflamed. And guess what? Your mobility restrictions just increased rather than if you just stay healthy going through a natural range of motion. Then when you do need to bend over and touch your toes, or you do need to do an ass to grass squat, or you do need to get into kind of a unusual position, you can do it because your body is healthy.
I've said this once, I'll probably say it again, but it's like you're doing good to the body.
Yeah.
So now when you need to do those tough positions, those compromised positions, you're able to handle that as best you can. Just like you guys were talking about in the squat experiment or the range of motion experiment. You were able to handle it kind of well. It's because you've programmed your body so good for many years. You have strong neuromuscular efficiency that you're able to attack those things. Now, if you kept doing that for a long time, at some point, it's going to burst out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of golfers, and some of the older guys who come to me super stiff, right?
Yeah.
And I train them optimal ranges, no mobility work, no twisting, turning with that.
No.
I tell them, hey, how's your golf game? They're great. I hit it further. I don't have lower back pain.
No.
I just feel great. Zero twisting and turning, zero, stretching, whatever.
Yeah.
Again, not passive stretching, active stretching.
Right, exactly. That's the key.
Optimizing function.
Yeah, active stretch. Yeah, I feel like there's so many topics we can just keep discussing here. We're definitely going to have a part 2, maybe even part 3, because these are this is how we talk when we have our sessions. This is ongoing. It just can be continuous.
This doesn't end.
It doesn't end. It does not end. And we didn't even really get deep into like the research of exercise science, going down into that rabbit hole, which I think the audience will find very interesting. We'll have to do that. One thing I just want to bring up here, because I've always found this fascinating over the years, you've been pretty good at predicting injuries that you see, whether it's in high-level athletes or just Instagram influencers. You'll send me things of like, hey, check out this trainer, this technique he's using. You can see that, he's compensating this way or that way. And you highlight to me like, hey, watch this. In like a year from now or 2 years from now, at some point he's going to have an injury to this area. And I can't tell you how many times it's actually come true to the point where like, okay, we got to have some type of betting thing going on here in Vegas. You got to put the odds down. Like,
I need to be a consultant. That's
I know, exactly.
But, I mean, well, like I said, I think that comes from a little bit of golf too. Like they're doing film study and analyzing body positions. That along with just like, I guess I have all my clients say I have a good eye for this. Like they, I'll point something out. They're like, oh, I did not see that. I have a couple of trainers that I train, and I always kind of like ask them, hey, what do you see? Kind of, I kind of take them under my wing and kind of like teach them some things. I'm like, what do you see there? And like they're like looking at this. I'm like, do you not see the toe right there, the ankle? Like, oh wow, no, I didn't see that. Right. So like. I think like I said, from the film study of like golf and then when I went to work at P3, also because they did 3D motion capture cameras with their force plates, right, and they could really dive deep into how certain movements elicit certain responses. And so I remember they had this guy, he was a basketball player. They always test, in the beginning of the season. Sometimes they'll come back mid-season, and then end of the season they'll run through their tests. And what they noticed was that when he came in the beginning of the season, it was good, but he had a little bit of valgus collapse, like a tiny bit in his left knee. Mid-season, it got worse, like because of the fatigue. Like, and I kind of talk about this too with my clients. Like, I'm not against any of that recovery stuff. When you are an athlete and you have a time crunch, you have to do some of these things to make yourself feel good. However, you've seen all the time where like these basketball players, whatever they are, like these football players, they have these calf injuries, right? That they'll work on and get better. I'm sure they inject foam roll, all that stuff, and then again they tear their Achilles.
Yeah.
Right. They desensitize their body and it tears. And so that basketball player came in, had way more of a valgus collapse. Like 2 months later, tore his MCL.
Yeah.
Right. Again, you can't really just say, "Oh, he had his knee was caving in, boom." But at a certain point, you say, "Hey, with what I know with anatomy and physiology, what I understand with biomechanics, we understand that the structures of your bones and your ligaments have to function in a certain way to withstand load and distribute that load across your body.
Right.
If you have a weak link, all that pressure goes there. When you have a cable on a bridge that is broken, right, that's gonna be the stretcher. That's gonna be the part that breaks."
Yeah.
And so, and then the other day, this is maybe a year ago, I saw a video of a tight end for a football team. I don't want to say any names and stuff, but I saw his lifting. He was doing a deadlift, and he lifted, it's like 545 pounds, a decent amount of weight, maybe 500, 600 pounds, lifting it up. And I was like, ooh, that looked weird. And he did a couple more reps. It's like, whoa, his left ankle and left knee are like caving in a little bit, And I watched him when he ran the 40 at the combine. I was like, I was like, hey, I think he's gonna pull his hamstring, just because I know, because that's how I pull my hamstring. It's like certain like positions in your body. Yeah. I looked up his injury: left hamstring pull, left ankle sprain, left shoulder impingement and concussion, whatever. But his entire left side was broken basically. And he kept on reinforcing that with his, you can see that knee was caving in every time. The right knee was great, structurally sound, loading properly, distributing that load throughout his body, but the left one was like, it was like, whoa, and there's plenty of instances like that I was like, just understanding how your body accepts the load and over time, what does it do? Because it's one thing to be a general population person, just walking around town with that kind of little valgus collapse, whatever. When you're playing like a sport at the highest level, producing that much force, something will give, right? If everything's not structurally sound, something's going to give. And so that's where I started sending you these videos hey, their back's going to probably hurt. Because I've experienced it myself.
Right. I've
experienced all these things, this knee pain, this back pain, all this stuff because of what I put my body through.
Right.
And so I can kind of see from, the training that I've had, from even the studies, that I've looked into in terms of how your foot, if you have, we talked about earlier, when you have, a heel strike, you get more forces going up your body versus someone who is a midfoot striker or a forefoot striker. And that's usually the shoe. I wrote a paper on this, the difference between like a shoe running versus a traditional shoe versus a minimalist shoe. And this is people who didn't have training. They just put on different shoes. They changed the way they ran.
Shortened their stride.
Shortened their strides. They, like I said, they landed more midfoot to forefoot, which actually made the gait more efficient, right? Less pressure going up into the body.
Yeah, right? I remember some of those studies. They've listed like 10 markers of improved biomechanics.
Right.
Just from changing shoes.
Right. Yeah. And so if we just have to, like I said, these are anecdotal observations. However, when you have enough anatomy and physiology, background, if you have enough understanding biomechanics, and you have enough experience training people and dealing with their injuries, because people will come to me, I get some of these tough cases. People who want to avoid surgeries, the PT didn't work, the chiropractor didn't work, and the doctor's like, hey, surgery is going to be the only way. I'll get some of these clients like, hey, you're like different than what I've seen. Can you fix me? Because they've seen my posts about all their injuries I've had. And so, I and then when I fix their posture, I fix their alignment, fix their compensations, the pain goes away. Some of them stop pain. Someone, I just had a client, he had a meniscus tear, and we were just training the whole time. But certain things that we would do, because he broke his ankle, so he had this like collapse in his knee. And then I was trying to get that left ankle, but it fused, a certain way because he broke it, and so he had to go get surgery because we couldn't fix that ankle. The ankle was sideways. Right. So there's certain cases that I can't, I can't do anything about. But most of the time when they come to me, especially with like a muscular issue, I can usually help them. by getting them into proper function, proper posture.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when people or doctors say someone needs surgery, I would say 90% of the time they don't. 10% of the time, yes, there's going to be some inevitable cases where there's so much structural damage and structural change that took place. But yeah, dude, we could keep going all night. I mean, we got so many things we want to keep talking about. We'll definitely have a part 2 for this coming up soon. In the meantime, where can people find you at?
I have really my Instagram is, Ben Lai, the Asian guy. I have my website, Bucket Sports Performance.
Bucket Sports Performance.
That's kind of the 2 main areas right now. Like I said, I've been really off social media for the past year.
You're going to have to stop being such a successful trainer so you can have more time to do social media, man.
Yeah. So that's
hey, start training ass to grass. You'll lose all your clients, and then you'll have plenty of time to do social media. That's the secret, guys. If you want to have enough time to do social media, train your clients ass to grass. You'll lose them all. You'll get a horrible reputation for injuring your clients. Boom. There it is.
That's how you're always good at that. Just poke the bear.
You poke the bear a little bit. Just a little dog. Just a little. Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has been long overdue, and we're going to do it again soon. So this is awesome.
I'm excited to kind of
good stuff, guys. All right, hope you enjoyed that. Check him out, Ben Lai, the Asian guy, on Instagram and other social media platforms. Hey guys, I'm excited to announce that my brand new book, Movement Redefined Fundamentals, is out and it's completely free. It's on my website, advancedhumanperformance.com, and it gives all the details of the 90-degree eccentric isometrics protocol, and it just gives all the fundamentals that you need to maximize your strength training and gain as much muscle as possible, as well as optimizing your joint health. So check it out. Again, it's completely free.